If you're a kid, please make note of this. It's for your own good. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and here's hoping for a bright new year. Well, that hope was completely dusted. I'm usually the kind of guy who tries to look for the positives in everything. It's how I cope with situations that seem unpleasant or even dire, and it's how I shape myself into who I am. While there were some personal positive things that happened to me in 2020, some going as far as to starting new phases in my life, there is no escaping the fact that 2020 was a complete ruination. For this entire year, we've had to deal with a virus responsible for millions of deaths, on top of many other events that were not pleasant to put up with. I do appreciate most video game companies trying to help us out with the pandemic through safe means, but not even they were free from downright upsetting stories. The various mishaps that can happen with console launches being more apparent here with the PS5 and Xbox Series X, Lab Zero completely imploding on itself, the stories of employees being crunched just so they can get certain games out, one of which had arguably one of the most catastrophic launches on consoles I've ever seen, and this year was also one of the worst times to be a fan of Smash Brothers, with the pandemic showing cracks in Ultimates Online, reports of sexual misconduct in several competitive players, not to mention on the CEO of EVO, which in turn caused EVO 2020 to be cancelled, and Nintendo's decisions to shut down online tournaments and try to cover up any sort of reference that spreads awareness of archaic business practices. This is all a massive headache. Thankfully, there are many different things that did help us get through this year. I'm sure you can name something that helped you a lot during quarantine, like online communication services, movies, shows being streamed, and yes, even video games. Releases I was interested in were fewer and farther between, but there were some diamonds to be found here. As usual, I haven't played every single game that came out in 2020, so there will definitely be some left off, but I will add in a rule that will allow big re-releases of games from previous years on here if I feel like they added enough to the original to be considered, and if I have never played the original. For example, Tokyo Mirage Sessions FE Encore is allowed on here because I haven't played the original on the Wii U, and I feel that there's enough here for me to consider it, but Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition is not allowed on here, since aside from a graphical overhaul, some quality of life changes, and the future connected story, it's largely the same game as the original on the Wii, so I'd be on repeat for most of the segment if I talked about it here. With all that said, I think it's time that I should thank these games for helping me, and who knows how many others in these dark times. I owe a lot to these. Hey look, it's a game I reviewed last summer when it came out. It only got number 10, but getting on here is definitely good, because even if I reviewed it when I did, my thoughts on Shantae and the 7 Sirens have barely changed, even if it has been a while since the series has dabbled into the Metroidvania structure, given the direction Half Genie Hero went. As a Metroidvania fan, I was more than happy to see that sort of design return here, but 7 Sirens went a few steps ahead in introducing some new things that really did add its own flavor into the mix and keep the pacing going, some of which I hope become series staples. I'm also a big fan of how all this stuff is mixed in with the dungeon design, and how it really gets your brain ticking on its layout and how to proceed. I mean sure, the game as a whole is nothing too taxing, in fact in some places it might feel like a breeze, but never once did I feel like it was on autopilot. Mix that in with some neat advancements to the presentation previous games didn't have, and this overall really makes a solid addition to the series. Pirate's Curse is still definitely my go-to Shantae game, but 7 Sirens still stands strong on its own as a game and as a follow-up. Only way to go from here is up. As stated earlier, most of us had something to make putting up with this year more bearable. Most of the time, if you ask someone what they did to stay safe, and that person answered with playing video games, Animal Crossing New Horizons is likely one of the first games to be brought up. It's not hard to see why though, as well the circumstances made socializing with others in real life a really bad idea. You can now socialize with your buddies online in this game, talk to some animals, and make your own island however you'd like to. It was enough to make this game the highest selling original Switch game to date, and having played it myself, yeah, it's quite nice. Granted, it probably won't be a game that will be up there with Pokemon Sword or Smash Ultimate as one of my most played games on the console, due to processes of getting your perfect paradise requiring dozens of hours, and how slow some processes might be, but honestly, I'm happy with whatever I can do at the moment. There's a big charm to just going around finding materials to craft new gear, making bank by ravaging a rock, or just fishing. It's relaxing and does make for a good game to go to whenever I just want to chill out in my own world. And with all games where you clobber bad guys or go on massive adventures, or do whatever crazy things fiction will allow for, sometimes this is all you need. I named my island Asgard. What's up, Danger? Oh hey, Miles Morales got his own game. That's really neat. Spider-Man Miles Morales is another game I reviewed recently, so I'd recommend checking that video out if you want my thoughts on it. That's what I'd say if I wanted to be obnoxious and leave you in the dark, but I'm not like that, so we're rolling it back. While I do think that this game played it a little too safe as a follow-up to the original 2018 game, to a point where many refer to it as a glorified expansion, the things that were carried over still feel great to do. Web swinging is still a dream, combat is still fun, the suits are still great, especially the Spider-Verse suit and the suit with a cat, and there's still lots to do. But things like the Venom powers and camouflage were great additions, and I still do appreciate how well they streamlined fulfilling the street crime quota, and even if the story does have similar elements from last time, what ultimately made it enjoyable was how each character was portrayed, and how much you could easily care for them and the world at hand. Despite preferences, I can still say that Miles Morales does a solid job in being a fun follow-up, and on its own, a really good Spider-Man game, and I hope what Sony, Marvel, and Insomniac are playing for the future of this universe will be just as great. Spider-Cat! I've honestly become really infatuated with Warriors crossover games as of late. Just the mere idea of characters from a series spanning across one world or several, coming together to unleash particle effect maelstroms on hordes of enemies, just really hits a special place within me. I loved it when both Zelda and Fire Emblem both dabbled into this, and while I want more of Warriors crossovers that go all out with the fan service, Koei Tecmo has now proven that they can also do this with a world of one single game, and include a story that is canon to the game they're basing it off of, and make it work. Enter Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, which uses the great calamity on Hyrule that set the events of Breath of the Wild into motion, and makes something new out of it. This I welcome quite a bit, because it works both as an addition to Breath of the Wild's lore, and as a great Warriors crossover game itself. Sure, the story doesn't go that much further than what was already established, but it makes up for that with giving me more reason to like a lot of these characters, and for overall playing fantastically, mixing up the traditional Musou experience with some elements from the game it's connected to. Every character has their own unique playstyle, with different combos and special attacks that are satisfying to pull off, but they each have their own special action that benefits their playstyle, like Urbosa charging electricity for special attacks, Revali preferring the air, and Mipha planting geysers so that she can get the high ground. And they have their own way of using the various slices for exposing enemy weaknesses, keeping things fresh, and adding in a layer of strategy. I also really like seeing all these locations from this version of Hyrule in full-on battlefield forms. The elemental rods are a welcome addition, there's plenty of great character interactions, and the game will definitely keep you busy with things to do if you want to do everything you can. Despite my preferences for more fanservice-y Warriors crossovers, I really don't have any objections to them taking this direction every once in a while. If it means more fun blowing away thousands of enemies, I'm all in. There is no better way of introducing this entry than by saying, it's about time! Say what you will about the parent company Activision, but one thing that has become clear recently is that they, or at least their subsidiary companies, do still care about franchises long since established and want them to continue in some form. Crash fans have got it really good right now, with remakes of a beloved trilogy from 2017 and a beloved kart racer from 2019, and now in 2020, a brand new game built from the ground up. And I've said all I needed to in the intro. Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time feels like a proper evolution of the classic Crash gameplay we all know and love. It keeps the foundation intact, but makes just the right updates to make it feel even better to play, and builds so many great levels to take things a step further. These levels meet the perfect mix of style and substance, including tons of amazing set pieces both in terms of visuals and level design, while also testing the player to see how well they can platform. This game's challenging, but definitely not in an unfair way, at least casually speaking. The game's very consistent in what it wants you to do, and it's so much fun to play through them to see what there is to discover. The extra levels that let you control Tawna, Dingodile, and even Cortex were also a great addition, as are the new Quantum Masks, which really add a lot to the levels they're in. The flashback tapes are a great set of side levels, the story is fun to follow and really funny to boot, and, assuming you're just playing the game casually and just going after what you want to go after, this game will definitely keep you occupied for a while. This is honestly a fantastic 3D platform that makes just the right transitions into modern conventions while not losing sight of what made this series great to begin with. If you like platformers, this is a definite must-play. Just don't make 100% completion one of your goals when getting this game. Please. I quite enjoyed Ori and the Blind Forest. Despite how uninteresting and frustrating the combat was, I loved exploring the world it presented, and the story was honestly really captivating, saying a lot, with surprisingly very little. But Moon Studios decided that they were going to make a follow-up, and man did they make a great follow-up. To tell you the truth, I'm going to have a hard time going back to Blind Forest, because Ori and the Will of the Wisps keeps everything great about the original and adds in so much more. The plot, while having some story beats you can see coming, was still very effective at giving you a reason to care, and even does a good job invoking a little emotion out. The presentation somehow one-upped the last game in terms of just pure beauty, and made each area of the forest feel different from one another, and there are so many gameplay refinements that make this an even greater Metroidvania to play. You've still got secrets and upgrades to look for, but I find the upgrades even more fun to use. The areas feel a lot more varied and challenging to let you use them, as well as bonus challenges that either throw enemies at you, or place you on a timer to get from one spot to the other. They got rid of the save point system for the last game and replaced it with normal auto-saving, thank you. And the decision to give Ori weapons surprisingly works for the better. Ori can do a lot with the weapons he's given, and it makes for a lot of dynamic fights against strong enemies and some large and imposing bosses, all of which are a blast. Though there are a few traditional chase sequences to keep things familiar to those who like the original. Ori and the Will of the Wisps is such a hypnotizing game that it really kept me engaged the second I laid eyes on it. It's a fantastic follow-up that blows the original out of the water, and I'm really anxious to see where Moon Studios goes from here. Well, this is a surprise. Avengers was the game I was most excited for in 2020, not counting updated versions, and it didn't make the top 3. Well, that's what happens when I like another game more, but I can safely say that all my expectations for this game were met, and the wait was well worth it. Every idea I wanted the story to take was definitely explored into, and brought together for a narrative that met a good balance between seriousness and some lighthearted fun. I love how each character plays, and the amount of crazy things you can do the further you go. Combat feels so slick and gratifying, not to mention rather strategic depending on the enemy variety. I was never bored during any fight, and there were plenty where I had to think about how to beat before charging in. And now that we do have all the characters, I can now say that Cap is my favorite character in the game. Sorry Iron Man, you know I still love you. I also loved the bosses, who provide a great challenge, and the large jungle gym-like level design that's fun to roam around in, and rewards you for going off the intended path to find whatever you can. There's even alternate costumes you can get, and a photo mode, 2 gaming staples I absolutely adore. Heck, the lesser tropes of live service game models barely bleed into the gameplay, and are not used for direct upgrades, so it's very easy to pick the game up and have an absolute blast with the large amount of content it has, and will hopefully continue to get in the future. I spent so much time with this game since day one, and I continue to do so to this day. Even if what I'm saying might not be popular, I don't care at all. This is a bona fide keeper, and I will continue to support this game in hopes that all the future content will be great as well. The amount of first-person shooters that have actually interested me are few and far between. Not a lot of games in that genre have really got my attention, and I just tend to brush them off. However, the 2 modern Doom games have truly proven that they can be a blast if you add in a really good flair to them. They've also become some of the most fun I've had with the genre recently, but as great as Doom 2016 was, I might find it hard to return to it when Doom Eternal took everything about it and kicked it up several notches. Everything great about the 2016 game was kept intact with a fantastic lineup of weapons, the good incentive to actually go melee, and being strategic with your ammo for enemies you might encounter. But not only did those receive some nice quality of life changes to make it all flow better, but so much more was added to make Eternal such a joy to play. The Doomslayer got a lot more mobility options, which makes levels feel a lot more open-ended, and really allow you to move fast to objectives, or explore around to fight hidden goodies. They added in a lot more of them to boot, some which being nice collectibles while others benefit you in a certain way. There's new kinds of enemies to fight, meaning you have to plan out your approaches to fights more often. The bonus encounters have been reworked into short burst encounters to shake things up as well. The toughest enemy encounters have been reserved for the new Slayer gates, and the pacing has been overall sped up considerably, with how things just tend to flow into one another. Doom Eternal will throw you on levels even more than the last game, but at the same time, it offers greater challenges. I admit I struggled with quite a few encounters, but I was having so much fun to really care. I love this game, and I can easily see myself coming back to it just so I can feel like an unstoppable force of nature ripping through everything. Video games are something else, let me tell you. I tried out the original Final Fantasy VII back in 2019 when a Switch version came around, and I totally see why it's regarded as a gaming legend in the eyes of others. I love how well it executes its own style on a traditional turn-based RPG, and I ultimately cared for the story, characters, and world to know where everything was going. But one reason why I got it was so I could eventually jump right into one game I wanted when I saw it in action. And it's the one that displayed everything in a great new light. Final Fantasy VII Remake managed to keep the spirit of the original intact, but even without knowledge of it, it's still a really tightly designed game that is able to stand strong on its own. It doesn't need the original to be understood, nor does it overshadow it in every way. The story does keep the same ideas, but does a lot more than it to really try and subvert expectations and give you something that you wouldn't have expected, especially when it comes to its characters. I mean, I already loved Cloud and Tifa, and this game drove it home, but when it comes to characters like Barret, Biggs, Jesse, Wedge, or heck, even Aerith, characters who I thought were just alright but nothing too special in the original, Remake gives them a ton more to work with, and I honestly appreciate the effort into making them feel more special. Same applies to Midgar, which feels a lot bigger and a lot more lively, but where this game truly shines its brightest to me is its combat. It meets the perfect balance between satisfying feedback and strategy. There's definitely RPG elements with materia spells, stat attributes, and what have you, but the biggest factor is utilizing the playstyle of the characters you have to try to figure out enemy patterns and weaknesses. No matter the foe, battles are always a blast, and the bosses take things one step further in being true test of skills, and are such spectacles to the senses. It's just unbelievable. There's little I can find wrong with this game, as it provided an experience that easily sticks with me. And this is only the first part. Yeah, there's more to come in the future, but if it can blow me away with what's essentially just the beginning of a new package, then it has really done something special. I have a few honorable mentions, so I'd like to get them out before we get to the top. Tokyo Mirage Sessions, FE Encore, J-pop with Fire Emblem characters as what are basically personas is really charming. The Last of Us Part 2, a solid way of continuing a game that was perfectly fine on its own, would have liked to have played it more before the year ended. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2. It's great to see this series back up again after it appeared to crash pretty badly 5 years ago. Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2, basically giving us more of the Castlevania love that Konami won't give us anytime soon. Also, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition would have taken the top spot if most of my positives didn't already apply to the original game. But I will add in a rule that will allow big re-releases of games from previous years on here if I feel like they added enough to the original to be considered, and if I have never played the original. J-pop with Fire Emblem characters as what are basically personas.
Show me your true form!
I've only played one Persona game so far, but holy cow, did Persona 5 Royal strike literally every good note within me and deliver one of the most gratifying gaming experiences I've ever had in recent years. Starting with the story, I love how it establishes how screwed up life can really be based on the decisions people make, and emphasizes the overall theme of rebellion against such cruel acts. I deeply cared about everything going on, and my desire to change what wasn't right really hooked me into every turn the plot took, and helped me get to know every single character, the main protagonists of which feel like a family because of how much they bounce off each other, and how they help each other grow as people. Because of all this, some of my favorite parts of the game are the parts that let you just live a normal life. I don't know why, but for as much as I love going to the moon and back with what you can do in Fiction, I love dialing it back and just hanging around a world with a cast of characters I like. Studying in school, hanging out with friends, maybe get a potential love interest, participating in minor activities, or just doing stuff hobby related. It's really relaxing. But roles can really benefit you by raising your social stats, or allowing you to gain access to stronger personas, which will immensely help you in the fictionalized parts within the metaverse. I love this part too, because each one of the palaces you've journeyed through are really well designed, and have plenty of tests and set pieces that are just fun, along with some really enjoyable turn-based RPG combat that rewards you for getting creative with your team's attacks, analyzing weaknesses, and maybe even recruiting a new persona to your side. And Roll even added in more, like expanded baton passes and showtime attacks, which really make everything flow better. Everything just comes together, and it never stops being an adventure that always engages me. And the funny thing is, it took me 85 hours to beat this game, secret segment added and Royal included, but not once did it feel like a drag. It earned those 85 hours, and it definitely earns any more I'm willing to throw at it. I perfectly see why people fell in love with this game, and I still can't get enough of it, and when that happens, you know you've got a keeper on your hands, and this game sure stole my heart away. I'm the Lane Ripper, and I want to take a moment to say thank you for watching my content. 2020 was painful to get through, but I want to show my appreciation to all those who have followed me throughout these times and showed support in any form. It means a lot to me. It's hard to tell where we can go from here, but I'm sure we can work together to make the future from here on out better. I'll see you all next time.